Henry, James, and Gordon were miserable. They had been shut up for several days for being naughty and longed to be let out again. At last Sir Topham Hatt arrived. "I hope you are sorry," he said, "and understand that every job on the railway is important. We have a new tank engine called Percy, who helps pull coaches, and Thomas and Edward have worked the main line nicely. But I will let you out now if you promise to work hard." "Yes, sir," said the three engines, "we will." "That's right, but please remember that this nose shunting nonsense must stop." He then told Percy, Edward, and Thomas that they could go and play on the branch line for a few days. And they ran off happily to find Annie and Clarabel at the junction. The two coaches were so pleased to see Thomas again. Edward and Percy played with freight cars. "Stop, stop, stop," screamed the cars as they were pushed into their proper sidings. But the two engines laughed and went on shunting till the cars were tidily arranged. Next, Edward took some empty cars to the quarry. Percy was left alone. He didn't mind that a bit. He liked watching trains and being cheeky to the other engines. "Hurry, hurry, hurry," he would call, and they got very cross. After a great deal of shunting, Percy was waiting for the signalman to set the switch so that he could get back to the yard. He was eager to work, but was being rather careless and not paying attention. Edward had warned Percy, "Be careful on the main line. Whistle to the signalman you are there." But Percy didn't remember to whistle, so the busy signalman forgot him. Percy waited and waited. The switch was still against him, so he couldn't move. Then he looked along the main line. "Peep, peep!" He whistled in horror, for rushing straight towards him was Gordon with the express. "Oh!" groaned Gordon. "Get out of my way!" Percy opened his eyes. Gordon had stopped with Percy's buffers a few inches from his own. But Percy had begun to move. "I won't stay here. I'll run away," he puffed. He went straight through Edward's station and was so frightened that he ran right up Gordon's hill without stopping. After that, he was tired, but he couldn't stop. He had no driver to shut off steam and apply the brakes. "I want to stop, I want to stop," he puffed. The man in the signal box saw Percy was in trouble, so he kindly set the switch. Percy puffed wearily onto a nice empty siding, ending in a big bank of earth. He was too tired now to care where he went. "I want to stop. I want to stop. I have stopped," he puffed thankfully. "Never mind, Percy," said the workman as they dug him out. "You shall have a drink and some coal, and then you'll feel better." Presently, Gordon arrived. "Well done, Percy. You started so quickly that you stopped a nasty accident." "I'm sorry I was cheeky," said Percy. "You were clever to stop." Then Gordon helped pull Percy out from the bank. The two engines are now good friends, but Percy is always most careful when he goes on the main line. a beautiful morning on the island of Sodor. Thomas the Tank Engine's blue paint sparkled in the sunshine as he puffed happily along his branch line with Annie and Clarabelle. He was feeling very pleased with himself. "Hello, Thomas," whistled Percy. "You look splendid." "Yes, indeed," boasted Thomas. "Blue is the only proper color for an engine." "Oh, I don't know. I like my brown paint," said Toby. "I've always been green. I wouldn't want to be any other color either," added Percy. Well, anyway, huffed Thomas, "blue is the only color for a really useful engine. Everyone knows that." Percy said no more. He just grinned at Toby. Later, Thomas was resting when Percy arrived. A large hopper was loading his freight cars full of coal. Thomas was still being cheeky. "Careful," he warned. "Watch out with those silly cars." Go on, muttered the cars. "And by the way," went on Thomas, "those buffers don't look very safe to me." The last load poured down. "Help! Help!" cried Thomas. "Get me out!" Percy was worried, but he couldn't help laughing. Thomas's smart blue paint was covered in coal dust from smoke box to bunker. "Ha ha!" chuckled Percy. "You don't look really useful now, Thomas. You look really disgraceful." "I'm not disgraceful," choked Thomas. "You did that on purpose. Get me out." It took so long to clean Thomas that he wasn't in time for his next train. Toby had to take Annie and Clarabelle. "Poor Thomas," whispered Annie to Clarabelle. They were most upset. Thomas was grumpy in the shed that night. Toby thought it a great joke, but Percy was cross with Thomas for thinking he had made his paint dirty on purpose. Fancy a really useful blue engine like Thomas becoming a disgrace to Sir Topham Hatt's railway. Next day, Thomas was feeling more cheerful as he watched Percy bring his cars from the junction. The cars were heavy and Percy was tired. "Have a drink," said his driver, "then you'll feel better." The water column stood at the end of the siding with the unsafe buffers. Suddenly, Percy found that he couldn't stop. The buffers didn't stop him either. "Oh!" wailed Percy. "Help!" The buffers were broken and Percy was wheel-deep in coal. It was time for Thomas to leave. He had seen everything. "Now Percy has learned his lesson too," he chuckled to himself. That night, the two engines made up their quarrel. "I didn't cause your accident on purpose, Thomas," whispered Percy. "You do know that, don't you?" "Of course," replied Thomas, "and I'm sorry I teased you. Your green paint looks splendid again, too. In future, we'll both be more careful of coal."
Thomas the Tank Engine is very proud of his branch line. He thinks it's the most important part of the whole railway. His two coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, agree with him.
Annie can only take passengers, but Clarabelle can take passengers, baggage, and the conductor.
They are both old and need new paint, but Thomas loves them very much. As they run backwards and forwards along the line, they sing songs to each other. When Thomas starts from a station, he sings, "Oh, come along, we're rather late. Oh, come along, we're rather late." And the coaches sing, "We're coming along, we're coming along."
They don't mind what Thomas says to them because they know he is trying to please Sir Topham Hatt, and they know too that if Thomas is cross, he's not cross with them.
One day they had to wait for Henry's train, which made Thomas very cross.
How can I run my line properly if Henry is always late? He doesn't realize that Sir Topham Hatt depends on me.
Thomas whistled impatiently. He wanted to leave, but he had to wait for Henry's passengers. At last, Henry came. "Where have you been, lazybones?" asked Thomas. "Oh dear, my system is out of order. No one understands my case. You don't know what I suffer," moaned Henry.
"Rubbish," said Thomas. "You're too slow. You need exercise." The conductor blew his whistle, and Thomas started so quickly that he left him behind. The conductor waved his red flag to stop Thomas, but he was well on his way, steaming out of the station.
Come along, puffed Thomas. But Clarabelle didn't want to come.
"I've lost my nice conductor. I've lost my nice conductor," she sobbed.
Annie tried to tell Thomas what had happened.
"We haven't a conductor. We haven't a conductor."
But he was hurrying and wouldn't listen.
Annie and Clarabelle tried to put on their brakes, but they couldn't without the conductor. "Where is our conductor? Where is our conductor?" they cried. But Thomas didn't stop till they came to a signal.
"Bother that signal," said Thomas. "What's the matter?" "I don't know," said his driver.
"The conductor will tell us in a minute." They waited and waited, but the conductor didn't come. "Peep, peep, peep! Where is the conductor?" whistled Thomas.
"We've left him behind," sobbed Annie and Clarabelle together.
Everyone looked, and there he was, running as fast as he could along the line with his flags in one hand and his whistle in the other.
He was very hot, so he had a drink, then told them all about it.
"I'm very sorry," said Thomas. "We all make mistakes," replied the conductor.
"Look, the signal is down. We can go. Let's make up for lost time."
Annie and Clarabelle were so pleased to have their conductor again that they sang "As fast as you like, as fast as you like" to Thomas all the way.
They reached the end of the line quicker than ever before.
One day, Thomas was at the junction when Gordon shuffled in with some freight cars.
Phew, remarked Thomas. What a funny smell. Can you smell a smell? I can't smell a smell, said Annie. A funny, musty sort of smell, said Thomas. No one noticed it till you did, grunted Gordon. It must be yours. Not long ago, he had fallen into a dirty ditch. Thomas enjoyed teasing him about it. Annie, Clarabelle, do you know what I think it is? It's ditch water. Before Gordon could answer, Thomas puffed away. Annie and Clarabelle could hardly believe their ears. He's dreadfully rude. I feel quite ashamed. I feel quite ashamed. He's dreadfully rude. And to Thomas they said, you mustn't be rude. You make us ashamed. But Thomas didn't care a bit. That was funny. That was funny, he chuckled. He felt very pleased with himself. Annie and Clarabelle were deeply shocked. They had great respect for Gordon, the big engine.
Thomas left the coaches at the station and went off to the mine for some cars.
Long ago, miners digging for lead had made tunnels under the ground.
Their roofs are strong enough to hold up cars, but not the weight of engines.
A large notice warns them not to enter the area. Danger! Engines must not pass this board. Silly old board, thought Thomas. He had often tried to pass it, but had never succeeded. But this morning he had made a plan.
The fireman went to throw the switch.
Now for my plan, thought Thomas.
Bumping the cars fiercely, he jerked his driver off the footplate and followed them into the siding.
Come back, yelled his driver. Fire and smoke, said Thomas. I'm sunk. And he was. Oh dear, he said, I am a silly engine.
And a very naughty one, too. I saw you, said Sir Topham Hatt. Please get me out. I won't do it again.
I'm not sure. We can't lift you out with a crane. The ground's not firm enough. Let me see. I wonder if Gordon could pull you out. Yes, sir, said Thomas. But he didn't want to meet Gordon just yet. Down a mine, is he? Ha, 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 laughed Gordon. What a joke. Poop, poop, little Thomas. We'll have you out in a couple of puffs. Strong cables were fastened between the two engines. Are you ready? Heave! It was a lot harder than they all thought, but at last Thomas was free. I'm sorry I was cheeky, said Thomas. That's all right, Thomas, you made me laugh, replied Gordon. I'm in disgrace. So am I, said Thomas. Why, so you are, Thomas. Shall we form an alliance? You help me and I'll help you. Right you are, agreed Thomas. Good, that's settled, rumbled Gordon. And buffer to buffer, the Allies puffed home.
Every day, Sir Topham Hatt came to the station to catch his train. "Hello," he always said to Thomas. "Don't let the silly freight cars tease you. Remember, you have an important job as a special helper in the train yard." There were lots of freight cars, and Thomas worked very hard pushing and pulling them into place.
There was also a small coach and two strange things his driver called cranes. "That's the breakdown train," he told Thomas.
The cranes are for lifting heavy things, like engines and coaches and freight cars.
One day, Thomas was in the yard. Suddenly, he heard an engine whistling. "Help! Help!"
A freight train came rushing through much too fast.
The engine was James, and he was frightened. His brake blocks were on fire. They're pushing me," he panted.
On, laughed the freight cars.
Still whistling, "Help! Help!" Poor James disappeared.
"I'd like to teach those freight cars a lesson," said Thomas the tank engine.
Soon came the alarm. "James is off the line! The breakdown train! Quickly!" Thomas was coupled on, and off they went. Thomas worked his hardest. "Hurry, hurry, hurry," he puffed. He wasn't pretending to be like Gordon. He really meant it.
Bother those freight cars and their tricks. I hope poor James isn't hurt.
James's driver and fireman were feeling him all over to see if he was hurt.
"Never mind, James," they said. "It was those silly freight cars on your old wooden brakes that caused the accident."
Thomas pushed the breakdown train alongside.
Then he pulled away the unhurt freight cars.
Oh dear, they groaned. Serves you right, puffed Thomas. He was hard at work, puffing backwards and forwards all afternoon.
This'll teach you a lesson. This'll teach you a lesson," he told the freight cars.
And they answered, "Yes, it will. Yes, it will."
They left the broken cars. Then with two cranes, they put James back on the rails.
He tried to move, but he couldn't, so Thomas helped him back to the shed.
Sir Topham Hatt was waiting anxiously for them.
"Well, Thomas," he said, "I've heard all about it, and I'm very pleased with you. You're a really useful engine. James shall have some proper brakes and a new coat of paint, and you shall have a branch line all to yourself." "Oh, thank you, sir," said Thomas. Now Thomas is as happy as can be. He has a branch line and two coaches called Annie and Clarabelle. He puffs proudly backwards and forwards with them all day. He is never lonely. Edward and Henry stop quite often and tell him the news. Gordon is always in a hurry, but never forgets to say poop poop, and Thomas always whistles peep peep in return.
Duck, the Great Western Engine, puffed sadly to Edward's station. "It's not fair," he complained. "Diesel has been telling lies about me and made Sir Topham Hatt and all the engines think I'm horrid." Edward smiled. "I know you aren't, and so does Sir Topham Hatt. You wait and see. Why don't you help me with these cars?" Duck felt happier with Edward and set to work at once. The cars were silly, heavy, and noisy. The two engines had to work hard, pushing and pulling all afternoon. At last, they reached the top of the hill. "Goodbye," whistled Duck, and rolled gently over the crossing to the other line. Duck loved coasting down the hill, running easily with the wind whistling past. Suddenly, it was a conductor's warning whistle. "Hurrah! Hurrah! Hurrah!" laughed the cars. "We've broken away! We've broken away! Chase him! Bump him! Throw him off the rails!" they yelled. "Hurry, Duck, hurry!" said the driver. They raced through Edward Station, but the cars were catching up. "As fast as we can, then they'll catch us gradually." The driver was gaining control. "Another clear mile and we'll do it." "Oh, glory! Look at that!" James was just pulling out on their line from the station ahead. Any minute, there could be a crash. "It's up to you now, Duck," cried the driver. Duck put every ounce of weight and steam against the cars. "It's too late!" Duck groaned. He veered into a siding where a barber had set up shop. He was shaving a customer. The silly cars had knocked their conductor off his van and left him far behind after he had whistled the warning. But the cars didn't care. They were feeling very pleased with themselves. "Beg pardon, sir," gasped Duck. "Excuse my intrusion." "No, I won't," said the barber. "You've frightened my customers. I'll teach you," and he lathered Duck's face all over. Poor Duck. Thomas was helping to pull the cars away when Sir Topham Hatt arrived. "I do not like engines popping through my walls," fumed the barber. "I appreciate your feelings," said Sir Topham Hatt, "but you must know that this engine and his crew have prevented a serious accident. It was a very close shave." "Oh," said the barber. Oh, excuse me." He filled a basin of water to wash Duck's face. "I'm sorry. I didn't know you were being a brave engine." "That's all right, sir. I didn't know that either." "You were very brave indeed," said Sir Topham Hatt. "I'm proud of you." Sir Topham Hatt watched the rescue operation. Then he had more news for Duck. "And when you are properly washed and mended, you are coming home." "Home, sir? Do you mean the yard?" "Of course." "But, sir, they don't like me. They like Diesel." "Not now. I never believed Diesel, so I sent him packing. The engines are sorry and want you back." A few days later, when he came home, there was a really rousing welcome for Duck, the Great Western Engine.
Thomas the Tank Engine was feeling very happy. His blue coat shone in the sun, he was right on time, and all around his branch line, the countryside seemed prettier than ever before. Beep, beep. Good morning, Percy, he whistled. My branch is the pride of the line, wouldn't you agree? Yes, Thomas, of course, but... But what, Percy? Out with it. Well, there is another engine with a famous branch line, too. Who? Where? His name's Stepney. He's far away, but Sir Topham Hatt says he may visit us. When? Oh, someday. And Percy hurried away. Meanwhile, Stepney was puffing steadily along his line. It isn't very long, and that made him feel a little sad. Later, he saw Rusty, the little diesel that helped save Stepney from scrap. Everyone's been so kind. But my railway is so short, and I do miss a good long run. I think you should tell Driver, too, replied Rusty. I'm sure he'll understand. Stepney soon discovered that indeed he did. Do you know, Stepney, I feel just the same way. That evening he had exciting news. Guess what, Stepney? Sir Topham Hatt has invited us to visit the other engines on his railway. Manager agreed. It'll be a really long run to get there. Oh, thank you, sighed Stepney. They set off next morning. By now, all the other engines were talking about Stepney. He runs a famous branch line. Did you know that? Said Percy. Thomas was feeling a little jealous. Huh. It may be famous, but my branch is the first on the line. Everyone knows that, too. And he huffed away to fetch his coaches. Look, squeaked Percy. Why have they all come? There's no train yet. But Percy was wrong. The signal dropped, and from far away an engine whistled. Here he comes, yelled Douglas. Stepney puffed proudly through the junction. I hope you'll meet Thomas, too, said Edward. You both have branch lines to be proud of. Then Stepney set off to help Duck shunt coaches in the yards, and they worked happily together all afternoon. At last, Thomas arrived. Sorry, can't talk. It's time for my last branch line train. Mustn't be late. He was hardly out of sight when the engines heard shouting at the station. Moments later came the alarm. Stop all trains! The signalman answered the telephone. A special, is it? I see. Thomas was impatient. Why are we waiting? My passengers are being delayed. Sorry, Thomas, said his driver. We're being shunted to allow another train to pass. Soon they heard an unfamiliar puffing sound. There was Stepney with his headlamp swaying and whistle blowing. He gathered speed and disappeared. Well, bust my boiler, said Thomas the Tank Engine. Next morning he was still fuming. Shunted, and on my own branch, too. It's a disgrace. I'm sorry, said Stepney. I was a special. Why? An important passenger arrived just as you left. He ordered a special train, and Duck let me take it. We had a splendid run, but, finished Thomas, it can make an engine nervous not to know the line. Exactly, said Stepney. You're such an expert. Thomas felt much better. He couldn't be cross anymore and began telling Stepney all about his branch line.
One night, Henry and Gordon were alone with James. Although Sir Topham Hatt was beginning to think well of him, whenever a chance came, the other engines would talk of nothing but bootlaces. "Remember when they had to use a bootlace to get you out of trouble, James?" they would tease. James tried to get back by talking about Henry, who got shut up in a tunnel, and Gordon, who got stuck on a hill, but they wouldn't listen. "You talk too much, little James," said Gordon. "A fine, strong engine like me has something to talk about. I'm the only engine who can pull the express. When I'm not there, they need 2 engines. Think of that. I've pulled expresses for years and have never once lost my way. I seem to know the right line by instinct." Every wise engine knows that the signalman sets the switches to make the engines run on the right tracks. But Gordon was so proud he had forgotten. "Wake up, James," said Gordon next morning. "It's time for the express. What are you doing? Odd jobs? Ah, well, we all have to begin somewhere, don't we? Run along and get my coaches. Don't be late." James went to get Gordon's coaches. They were all shining with new paint. He was careful not to bump them, and they followed him smoothly into the station singing happily, "We're going away! We're going away!" "I wish I were going with you," said James. "I should love to pull the express and go flying along the line." Gordon, with much noise and blowing of steam, got ready to back onto the train. Sir Topham Hatt was on the train with other important people, and as soon as they heard the conductor's whistle, Gordon started. "Look at me now," he puffed, and the coaches glided after him. "Whoop, whoop, 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 whoop. Goodbye, little James. See you tomorrow." James watched the train disappear and then went back to work. He pushed some freight cars into their proper sidings and went to fetch the coaches for another train. James had just brought the coaches to the platform when he heard a mournful noise. There was Gordon trying to sneak into the station without being noticed. "Hello, Gordon. Is it tomorrow?" Gordon didn't answer. He just let off steam feebly. "Did you lose your way, Gordon?" "No, it was lost for me. I was switched off the main line onto the loop. I had to go all round and back again." "Perhaps it was instinct," said James. All the passengers were shouting at the ticket window, "We want our money back." Sir Topham Hatt climbed onto a cart and blew the conductor's whistle so loudly that they all stopped to look at him. Then he promised them a new train at once. "Gordon can't do it. Will you pull it for us, James?" "Yes, sir. I'll try." So James was coupled on and everyone got in. "Do your best, James," said Sir Topham Hatt. Come along, puffed James. "You're pulling us well, sang the coaches. "Hurry, hurry, hurry," puffed James. Bridges and stations flashed by. The passengers cheered, and they soon reached the station. Everyone said thank you to James, and Sir Topham Hatt was very impressed. "Well done. Would you like to pull the express sometimes?" "Yes, please," answered James. Next day, when James came by, Gordon was pushing freight cars. "I like some quiet work for a change," he said. "I'm teaching these cars manners. You did well with those coaches, I hear." "Good. We'll show them." And he gave his cars a bump. James and Gordon are now good friends. James sometimes takes the express to give Gordon a rest. Gordon never talks about bootlaces, and they're both quite agreed on the subject of freight cars.
Picture a land where the sky is so blue, storybook land of wonder, magical island just waiting for you. Island of Sodor will make your dreams come true. Imagine a place where the sun always smiles, the valleys are green as can be. Friends that you love are all waiting for you. Island of Sodor will make your dreams come true. Children, follow the dream to a land of make-believe. Hills and mountains. Look for the skies with stars in their